We're here with Martin Lindstrom. He is a marketing expert who has written Buy-ology, The Truth and Lies About Why We Buy. This book essentially recounts the results of a 3-year-long, $7 million study into the neurological foundations of why we buy.
Absolutely. What I wanted to do was to find out what really goes on in our brain as we walk down the aisle in a supermarket. Because we think we are so clever, you and I, but we're not. Actually, 85% of the decisions we make in the supermarket, or whatever decisions we make when we buy brands, are made in the non-conscious part of our brain. So the reality is that the majority of the stuff we do, well, we do that on autopilot. And that's what I wanted to discover in this project.
And now you're a marketing expert. Now tell me the reasons behind why you wanted to sort of get that level of awareness.
Well, the main reason why is because advertising really doesn't work anymore. 8 out of 10 new product releases fail. And because we're in a recession right now, you really have to be clever at understanding what the consumers want and how to deliver it. So I wanted to find out what really goes on in the brains of consumers. And secondly, I wanted to find out if all those myths coming from the world of advertising, if they hold. Because what we learned now is that most of it doesn't hold anymore, because the way we did research in the old days was to ask questions, and guess what? When we ask questions, most of the feedback we get is kind of not correct.
Now, you went around, over 3 years, it was a $7 million experiment using magnetic resonance imaging and essentially electronic brainwave measures.
EEG, yeah.
When people were dealing with products, who paid for this?
I did.
You paid for it yourself?
Kind of, yeah. Oh. What I did was to do two things. I went around.
I smell a promotional opportunity for BreakRoomLive.
Well, listen, I decided to do this study and pay for it partly myself because the problem was that no research companies wanted to work with me.
Right.
I've done a lot of books in the past where I worked with the largest research companies in the world, but they felt this was so controversial, going so much to the edge. They called it Franken-science, that I could not persuade them.
So who else contributed in the research?
GlaxoSmithKline. We had Fremantle, which is the largest media production company in the world. We had a Japanese agency, advertising agency, and then a range of different pretty prominent brands which you would know of, but which I can't talk about.
Right.
So we had 7 sponsors. They paid for some of it, and I paid for the majority of it.
Some of the interesting findings, well, one that struck me was that the messages on cigarette packs that basically say this is going to kill you actually encourage people to smoke.
Yeah, it's very scary. I had the theory that this would be the case, but no one has been able to prove it. Here's the fact. We actually, over the last 3 years, smoked 13% more. In average, we're smoking 10 million cigarettes every minute. So this is huge stuff. So I wanted to find out why, because it's basically banned to smoke indoor, there's health warnings on every cigarette pack, advertising is banned, yet we're smoking more. So I looked at the health warnings, we used fMRI, and we did some lab experiments where we exposed smokers for those health warnings, both the ones you have here in North America and the one you have in Europe, which is much bigger and much more dramatic. And what we learned was exactly as you are saying. We had to learn that those health warnings had the total opposite effect. In fact, they encouraged people to smoke even more. And of course, this is a bit of a shocker, because it means in the end of the day that this has been a killer marketing weapon for the tobacco industry. And they most likely have been aware of this, but no one has been able to prove this before now.
Now, why do you think they've been aware of it? Do you think they've done their own studies of this ilk, or they just...
I do, actually. I spoke with a company the other day which actually is doing EEG, and they were in dialogue with the tobacco industry 20 years ago using EEG. So that gives you an indication of these guys are pretty advanced. In fact, they tried to stop this book, and 14 tobacco companies have tried to ask us to work for them. And most of them have tried to stop the book as well. So this gives you an indication of this is in reality a secret which they are not prepared to release to the rest of the world.
This exercise, and it's not just an exercise, I mean, because there's an end to it, is a little bit disturbing. Do we really want to allow for marketers to have these type of tools?
I think the reality is we cannot avoid it. I think we are right now leading towards a path where something needs to change in the way we do research. So that's the reason why I decided to write Buy-ology and do this study. The book is written to a broad audience, to everyone basically, because I wanted to share the dialogue. I wanted to share the information with Mrs. Smith, as well as with the business people, because then we can have a debate around it and we can talk about ethics. But there's no doubt about that the ethical issue is incredibly prominent and really important to discuss, because what we learn in this project is we can see a lot in the brain, and we certainly will very soon hit an ethical brick wall where we have to consider how far can we go and how far should we go.
I do commend you for writing this book in a way that I think is accessible to people who are not marketers or brain surgeons.
Yeah, well, I wanted my mom to read this book and understand it, which is really tricky, I can tell you. But, I think in the end of the day, if I would have written an ordinary business, hardcore business book, you and I would not have been talking.
Right.
And then the debate would not have happened. And guess what? Companies would have sneaked this neuromarketing in of the back door. And really, the ethical issue would not have been discussed.